I'm meeting today with mediator Vic Rainey. And Vic looks a little different than the average mediator we've spoken to, not wearing a shirt or tie or anything like that, because you're from where?
Up in the Summit County area where we're relaxed atmosphere.
Now, may I ask, are you involved in some kind of farming or cattle operation too, or?
Well, I raised and trained Arabian horses for trail riding since 1982, something like that, about 34, 35 head of them all together, but I'm down to 4 head, and I'm about out of the horse business now.
That's interesting.
Getting too old to...
Don't meet someone in that line of work every day. But you're a mediator as well.
Yes.
Tell us a little, how'd you get involved in doing that?
Well, I came down from up there above Colville for once a month for 10 years as a member of a foster citizens children review board. And I was on that for 10 years and got finally so disgusted with the state not providing enough funds so that caseworkers couldn't they had more cases than they could handle. So I quit that, and after about 6 months or so, I still needed something more to do. So these attorneys up in Summit County were just organizing this Mountain Mediation Center. Summit County hadn't had any mediation before, prior to that. So these attorneys got together and formed Mountain Mediation Center, and they put a notice in the paper of people that wanted to be mediators come and talk to them. So I went over and talked to Natalie Siegel. She was the main one kind of pushing it. And she said, well, you've got to have training first before you can be a mediator. And I said, well, fine, where do I get that? And she said, well, Utah Dispute Resolutions down in Salt Lake, they offer training at least twice a year probably in domestic and basic mediation and also domestic mediation. So I said, well, that's fine. I guess you guys will pay for it if I go get the training. She said, no, you got to pay for it. I said, I'm volunteering my time and you won't pay. So anyway, I said, yeah, I'll go pay for it. So I went and took the basic mediation training down there at Utah Dispute Resolutions.
And when was that?
2006, I believe, as I remember.
What have you done since then?
Well, the woman that was the executive director for the board, there wasn't many people available, and I was the only, you might say, outside mediator. They did have a training class where several of the attorneys up there took the training, but they didn't really act as mediators afterwards. I just kind of did it because and I think Mountain Mediation Center paid for their training. I don't know for sure, but they had talked Park City Municipal Corporation into what a great deal this was going to be for the city, and really it was a big help. They got a big grant to start with, which is what we've worked on for a year or two. But anyway, the woman that was the executive director then, shortly after it was formed, she got a job down at Westminster College here in Salt Lake. And so she said she had to give up the director job. Well, the others were all attorneys, or I think, and they didn't want to spend their time being executive director. So I said, well, I'm practically retired, so I'll do it, even though it's I have to travel 30 some miles to get from my place over to Park City to the Justice Court. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's how I got into it, and they said, okay, you're the executive director now, and they pay me a small amount of money. The city thinks it's more than I should be paid, but I think it's less than I should be paid because of the you know, not only the travel time, but I have to do all the bookkeeping and keep the accounts and try to be sure that I've only, since 2006, I think I've only missed about 2 small claims court meetings over there.
Do you see mediation doing people who are in small claims court cases a service?
I think it is because, well, there are just some cases that it's hard for a judge to make a decision on. Some of them are so unusual. I had one a few years ago where a woman had hired a dog trainer to train her small dog. I don't know what he was going to train the dog to do, but it was a very small dog. And she took him to court, small claims court, wanted to take away his license and didn't want to pay. He charged her $3,000, and she half of that had to come up front, and then he wanted the rest of it. But she brought him into court and brought the dog collar, and it was a collar, these shock collars that you use on dogs for training. Well, I used to have one for a lab that I trained years ago, and this collar was what you would use on a big dog. It's not what you would use on I don't think on a small dog, which, so I totally agreed with her. But anyway, the judge, after listening to a few minutes, he said, well, you're going to have to mediate this case. There's no money particularly involved, although the last half, the other $1,500 was involved. He said, I'm going to recess for 15 or 20 minutes and you meet with the mediator and see if you can't settle this. So we met, and he finally agreed that he would not try to get his other $1,500 for training. And he tried to get her to agree that she wouldn't tell any of her friends that she thought he was a bad trainer, and she said, well, I can't do that. I think you are a bad trainer. And look at this collar, and I'm going to keep this big collar and show my friends what you did. So anyway, this was a case that the judge could see wasn't something he could really handle. So there's a few of them like that. Most of the cases in small claims court up there have something to do with construction or remodeling in one way or another, because there's so much that goes on up there, and those second home people stuff kind of thing. And then there's the renter, the tenant and rent owner situations where the renter moves out and the owner comes in and says, oh, look at all the damage you've done. Well, then they come into court to try to prove to the judge that the tenant did all this damage. And the ones that I can talk in the mediating, I say, how can you prove it? Why didn't you both take pictures at the time you moved in? So you both had the same day, you both had a camera and date. Well, we didn't think of that, but you can see from what damage here. And I said, no.
Yeah, I can see some damage perhaps, but I don't know who caused it.
When did it happen? Was it the prior tenants or? So anyway, it's a mix of things. We have those homeowners associations. I've tried to get them to use us more. I talked to a couple of board members, and the answer I got from both of them is we don't need to mediate if they don't do what we tell them, what they've agreed to do when they signed up as a member of the homeowners association. We just file a lien on their property. And I said, yeah, you'd file a lien, but you still got to go to court.
Or you've still got the same problem, just a lien now, but that doesn't mean they're going to change necessarily.
Yeah, and it's things like this one that they did agree to mediate after they got the small claims court. And what happened, what it was a matter of 3 feet. You know, your carport has a storage unit at the back of it, and the guy had a boat. So if he had the boat right back against the cabinet, he couldn't open the doors, but he wasn't infringing on the open space. But if he moved the boat out 3 feet so he could open the cabinet, the door, then he was infringing on the open space. And so they were going to fine him and make him move his boat. And what he said was, I just didn't like their attitude. Well, they probably just were very dogmatic about what he had to do. And so anyway, we talked it over, and when I talked to him, he said, yeah, I know, I signed that, and I shouldn't have my boat out there, but I didn't like their attitude, but I'll find someplace else to store my boat if they'll not fine me and not take this case any further.
That's cool.
So that's what we did. They agreed, yeah, we won't fine him if he's gonna move his boat. All we wanted him to do was comply with the rules.
And so you're in Colville, is that correct? Or
No, I'm about 7 miles east of Colville, up Chalk Creek Canyon. That's where I live. I've got 20 acres.
it's not incorporated then? It's just an unincorporated part of the county, or?
Oh yeah, just unincorporated, yeah.
That's interesting.
It's
Well, I appreciate it.
farmland, ranch land, and on both sides of me. And there's bigger farms and ranches. In fact, the one on the west side of me, they own the mountain on just to the south of me. And when we got up there and were training horses, I asked them if I could ride up on their mountain there because it was a fairly open and they had a fairly good road, so I wasn't fighting a lot of brush. But anyway, we moved up there. We built a log home up there, bought the 20 acres and built a log home in '95. But anyway, we've tried to get more mediation going up there. For 3 years, I ran an ad, what was it, 4x4, something like that, in the paper up there, that there's 4 libraries in the county. Colville, Camas, Park City, and the one at Kimball Junction, the main county library there, the new one they built. So I ran an ad for, I think it was for about 3 years, that I would be at 11 o'clock at this library, and the next week at 11 o'clock at this library, and if you wanted to come in and talk about if mediation could help you, that's fine. I'd be glad to talk about it. It wouldn't cost you anything.
Do you charge a fee then now, though? You or the organization?
Yeah, well, we've always charged in some cases. Because we're a non-profit, we don't charge like anything that's comparable to a small claims court case. We don't charge them anything.
And you cover Summit County then?
Yes.
Okay. Any part of Wasatch or Heber or anything like that?
Well, I've had some mediators who were in training come from over in Heber, come over to observe, and after they got their hours in, they have to, I don't know if you're familiar with what they've done now with mediators, they have to have 20 hours, I think it is, of observation or co-mediation.
Right.
And then after that's just domestic. Then if they want to go into that's basic. Then if they want to go into domestic mediation, where you're talking about divorces and child cases and things like that, why, you've got more hours, plus you have to hire a mentor. And those are running, I heard, about $1,000 to hire.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's
quite a bit
different
of have
than
to
when
go
I
through.
went into it.
That's right. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about your background in it. And for those that would be interested in speaking to you further, could you just give us your number where you can be reached for mediation services?
Well, we have a voicemail box, 435-336-0060. That's the voicemail box, which I access. I try to at least once a week to see if somebody left a message there. Or my home phone of 435-336-4302. I can be reached at either one of those.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you coming in to talk a little bit about your
Okay.
experience and what you can offer to people.
Well, it's interesting. And the divorce cases are, I'm amazed that we don't get more calls up there. I had one attorney call me, and I guess, I don't know how he got me, other than maybe on the divorce court roster. But we had to come down to Salt Lake here to mediate the case.
Mhm.
And both the wife and the husband had their own attorneys, and we spent 4 hours with the husband and his attorney making offers, and me going in and trying to talk the wife and her attorney into, if not accepting it, making some kind of a counteroffer. For 4 hours, all they would do is say no. So I finally, that's it. That's 4 hours. That's enough of this, and I'm not going to give. You're supposed to write a memorandum of understanding after you turned it. I said, there was no mediation.
There's no agreement.
There was not even
No
any
mediation.
mediation
No, it's
today. You got to have an offer or a counter offer of some kind.
Not just a no, and just
Yeah.
rejecting everything out of hand.
If you just keep saying no, that's not mediation. So I said, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we spent a lot of time, but there was no mediation.
That's interesting. That's a great way to end on it, and it is important for people to realize that mediation does require some effort. It's not something that the mediator provides. It's that you're there to help the parties kind of stay on track and see if you can facilitate them reaching an agreement, but it's not your job to make them reach an agreement or even try to convince them to reach an agreement.
Right.
Thank you so much again for coming in. I
Okay.
appreciate you taking the time.
Okay.